The shadow of the person is always existed. If there's light, right, you exist, your shadow exists. The moment you move your hand, you have the shadow of the finger, the shadow of the hand. You can't separate, it's always there. When your hand is there, the cell is there. Cell, even though it was always there, the cell has a cause. The cell wouldn't be there without the person. The person doesn't need the cell, the shadow, but the shadow needs the person. Why? Because the person is the cause, not in time, but the person is the cause, even though the mamash come together. But each time we are building up more, more understanding and hopefully trying to expand the picture. And that's my purpose here, that not only that we are understanding each year a subject, more or less of a subject that is being presented, rather we can always go back to place it in the bigger picture. Why are we discussing it? What is the context? So this is what I want to do. But I don't have the original book here in front of me. I know that we are holding on page Reish Chaf, and I think in the old edition Sterne is Kuf Samech Vov. But I want to go back to the few paragraphs back, starting וגם צריך להבין בעיקר העניין שנסבאר לאל שיש בייס מיני המשכוס. בבחינת אין סוף ובבחינת מידה וגבול. We spoke about the fact that there are two kinds of hamshachos that come from Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. What we call the Makif and the Pnimi. I'm just reviewing, maybe to deepen a little bit here and there, but basically it's a review. So we asked the question, how can we divide Or Ein Sof that is infinite, right, Ein Sof, to two aspects? From where you get two, it's one infinite Or. From where you get Makif and Pnimi, where you get two types. So we learned before that there are two types of Hamshachas coming from Or Ein Sof. The Hamshacha of Makif, we learned, comes from Ein Sof, or Malchus of Ein Sof, as we learned. It comes from Malchus of Ein Sof, that is called Soivev Kol Almin. And then we have the other Hamshacha, the Hamshacha of Or Pnimi. This is the Hamshacha of Or HaKav. And that Hamshacha comes, B'midah Ugvul, comes with a measure, with the element of finitude. And it's called Memale Kol Almin. And we explained, going a little bit even further, that Or HaSoivev, the light that comes from Or Ein Sof, that encompasses, it transcends all worlds, this is the shoresh, the root of nisim ba'olam, of miracles in the world. And that is the shoresh of nes. And then the Or HaKav, the Or that comes that b'midah ugvul, that's the shoresh of the chayus ativis ba'olam, of the normal, so to speak, natural course of the way the world exists. And now, so we have the question, since these two hamshachos, the soivev and the memale, the miraculous type and the normal, natural type, are coming from Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, why is it? Why one hamshach comes in a manner of Ein Sof, of Sovev and Makif, and not limited, and why the second hamshach comes b'midah and gvul, the Or HaKav, from where we have this division? So you can think that why are you asking this question? This question is not needed. Why? Because before, the Rebbe explained that Or HaKav how does the light of the curve come down? Stern, I would love to see you. How does the light of the curve come down? It comes through the tzimtzum. We're beginning a more deeper discussion. I'm giving chazara, but it will lead to I hope you will all survive it. Because we are going to get into some deep discussions. And to begin with, I'm not going, as I always say, this is like the first level of learning, that we are learning it, and you can go deeper, but I don't want to overwhelm ourselves. But we will get into some deep discussions, so we kind of need to hold on to each other's mental hands and to deep sea dive together. But now it's a chazara. But here is a question on the question. Why are you asking how come there are two types of hamshachos that come from Or Ein Sof? You yourself taught us that the light of the curve comes through the tzimtzum. And the tzimtzum limits the light and turns it into a light that comes b'mida and gvul. And then the hamshacha of makif doesn't go through the tzimtzum. Rather, it okef. Okef in Hebrew means goes around the tzimtzum, avoids the tzimtzum, kivyachol. And therefore, that type of hamshacha is not compromised by the tzimtzum, and it remains infinite, unlimited. So, what is the question? What is the question that the Rebbe is asking? How come you have two hamshachos? You have one hamshacha that comes through the tzimtzum and one that doesn't. To understand that, explains Rabbi Gopin, we need to first explain that there are rules that are dictating and causing one hamshacha to go through the tzimtzum and another hamshacha to detour the tzimtzum, to go around the tzimtzum. There are rules to it. It's not a random thing. And now he explains, and I explained it and I'm repeating it. As known, the purpose of the tzimtzum is to transmit the flow, the divine flow, from level to level. And this, we are talking about levels that are incomparable one to the other. Right? We're not talking about gradual levels. You go a few steps down, you get to the next level. You're talking about levels that are incomparable one to the other. There is a leap between one and another. En aroch. They are far from each other. How is it possible? So the tzimtzum is involved here. The tzimtzum causes a separation, so to speak, between one level and another, and causes a tremendous change in the quality of the flow and the quality of the divine light. As it goes from the higher level to the lower level, the tzimtzum causes a big shinui, a change in that light. So now the light that comes and shines very strongly on a higher level is now compromised. And now it can shine also in a lower level that cannot contain such bright light. And this is like you have a sunlight and you put a curtain on your window that will compromise a little bit and screen the sunlight. Only some of it should come into your room. It depends on the thickness of the curtain that changes and alters the light from the sun, And now you can mekabel it in the room the way you wish. Such tzimtzumim are all over Seder Ishtalshelus. But the first one that we are dealing with is what is called the Tzimtzum Arishon, which I did mention then, and I mentioned again, that there are tremendous, maybe even bigger Tzimtzumim before the Tzimtzum Arishon. And that's Bechlal, how there is light coming from Hashem altogether. But now we are talking about Tzimtzum Arishon, about Tzimtzum in Or Ein Sof. This Tzimtzum hides Or Ein Sof and reveals Or HaKav, which is Mugbal and Madud, which is limited and measured. And it makes it possible to shine in the worlds. So too, there is another Tzimtzum, very important one that we are familiar with, and that's the parsa between Atzilus and Biyah, between Atzilus and Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. There is a parsa which is like parsa is a hoof, but it's like a mechitza, it's like a curtain that separates between them, and it affects Neshamas Yisrael as well. We began this Hemshech of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, talking about different neshamas of Banim and neshamas of Abadim, neshamas of Atzilus and neshamas of Biyah, higher neshamas of Atzilus and which are called neshamas of Atzilus Mamash, and lower neshamas of Atzilus. There are really 3 levels of neshamas of Atzilus: the Moichin, of neshamas of Zoh, and neshamas of Malchus. So when the Neshamas Yisrael come down from Atzilus to Biyah through the Parsa, so that is a Tzimtzum. What does a Tzimtzum do? A Tzimtzum changes the nature of the light in a significant way. And so too, this Parsa creates a tremendous change in the relation between the neshama as it goes through this parsa and Hashem and godliness. There's the level of bitul that the neshama had being in Atzilus is not maintained anymore. It's a way lower level of bitul to Elokus and way bigger sense of self. There are exceptionals or exceptions, and those are neshamos that broke through this curtain, this parsa, between Atzilus and Biyah, without being subjected to that tzimtzum. And even after they came down to this world, they maintain their Atzilus reality and their high level of bitul, the way it is in Olam HaAtzilus. These are neshamas of Atzilus. These are the Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the heads of the Jewish people, the Nesim, the leaders, the Rebbeim. Surely, explains Rabbi Agapin, and surely explains Hasidus, this is not random. There are rules. Seder Ishtalshelus operates based on rules. And there is a klal, there is a rule that determines which neshama will break through this pargo, this parsa, this curtain, and maintain its Atzilus nature, and which neshama will change as a result of going through the parsa, through this tzimtzum. And now it will be experiencing the reality of neshamas of Biyah. And that is the reality. There are many levels in this reality as well. But the bottom line is that the nature of the experience of neshamas of Biyah is that which is obvious is the self. And that has to be related to and figured out, that's godliness. That's the difference between Atzilus and Bia. Many different, but one way to describe it. So there are rules. Which neshamas will maintain the reality of Atzilus, which the reality of Atzilus is that first the obvious is a lokus, is godliness. And then there is a sense of myself in relation to that. There are rules that determine which neshama will change as a result of going down and which neshama will not. It's like the rules that determine which aspect of Or and Sof will be subjected to Tzimtzum Harishon, and which light of Or and Sof will go around it and will not be subjected to the Tzimtzum and will remain Or HaSoiber. Regarding the neshamas, which one maintains the reality of Atzilus and which one becomes a neshama of Biyah, that is determined according to the shoresh of the neshama, to the root, the spiritual root of the neshama. Where does it come in Atzilus? Where does it come from in Atzilus? Those neshamos that are coming from a higher level of Atzilus, like Zoh of Atzilus, break through the parsa and maintain their nature, maintain their experience of Atzilus. Those neshamos that come from a lower level of Atzilus, from Malchus of Atzilus, they go through the parsa and change, and now acquire the reality and the experience of neshamos of Biyah. One way to understand it also is that the neshamas that are coming from a higher level of Atzilus, their light is so strong that the parsa cannot dim it. Doesn't make a big change, a big difference, because the light is so strong. And the lower neshamas of Atzilus, of Malchus of Atzilus, most of us come from there, their light is not as strong as the higher neshamas, and therefore it gets compromised by the parsa. So that's one way to look at it. In any case, we also learned before, I don't know if any of you remembers, that we spoke about the parsa between Ak and Atzilus, between Adam Kadmon and Atzilus, and we spoke about the fact that this parsa is affecting the Tzimtzum only to Biyah, but not to Atzilus. Anyhow, let's not overwhelm ourselves. Now, coming back to our original question, how is it possible that there are two kinds of Amshachas? That one goes through the Tzimtzum and the other one goes around it. So the Rabbi Gopin explained like this. If we divide the light before the Tzimtzum, that we say that before the Tzimtzum there were already two levels, then we can say that the light that comes in a manner of midah and gvul, of measure and limitation, comes from the lower level of Or and Sof that are connected, that are shayach to gvul and midah. And therefore the tzimtzum affects it. In a way, it's like the neshamos, the neshamos that comes from the lower level of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus, the parsa between the tzimtzum, between Atzilus and Biyah will affect them. And the same thing here, the light that comes, if you say that there are two aspects of Or and Sof before the Tzimtzum, then it's easy to explain. It's like what we explained about the Neshamos. Neshamos that come from the lower level of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus, have less light and therefore will be affected by the Tzimtzum, by the Parsa, between Atzilus and Biyah, and will change. Neshamos that come from Zoh of Atzilus, higher level of Atzilus, and certainly neshamos that come from Moichin of Atzilus, they have so much light and they are so intense that the parsa will not affect them. You can say the same thing here, that the or that is mugbal, that the kav or the gvul come from the lower level of Ein Sof, of Or Ein Sof, and therefore the tzimtzum hides and compromises and conceals. And however, the light that is bilti mugbal, that is infinite, that comes from the higher level, which is Ein Sof Mamash, the tzimtzum will not block it. But then, here is the question, and we need to concentrate, explains Rabbi Gopin, that since the two Hamshachas come from the same source, Or and Sof, before the Tzimtzum, both Hamshachas, the Hamshacha of Gvul and the Hamshacha of Bli Gvul, which means Soivev u'Memale, Makif and Pnimi, both of them come from the same source, which is Or and Sof before the Tzimtzum, which is infinite and unlimited. So Miman Nafshach, either way, if the Tzimtzum can hide Or and Sof before the Tzimtzum, that it would hide both Hamshachos. And if the Tzimtzum cannot hide over it, then both Hamshachos have to come in a manner of Bilti Mugbal. And therefore, we still have the question, how come, we're talking about Or and Sof, how come one aspect of it will be coming down in a manner of infinity, and the other aspect will be finite? It makes more sense that either both of them, if both of them are coming from one source, which is Or Ein Sof, it's an infinite light. So either, if it's infinite. So either the Tzimtzum will affect both of them, and they will be both limited, or it doesn't, and it can't, because it's Or Ein Sof, and therefore both Hamshachos should be unlimited, should be Bilti Mugbal. So now, if those who want to follow it deeper, and maybe to listen to the recording if we're falling asleep, so you can come and challenge me right away, give me an answer. What do you mean? What are you so grappling with the fact that there are two types of even really opposite Hamshachos that come from Or and Sof? From where? From Vu, from Vanen. Where did these two come? And why is like this and one is like that? So you could come and say, wait a minute, so many times you quoted what Hasidus quotes, the Sefer Avodas HaKodesh, that Keshem Sheyesh Lo, this you should know by heart. Keshem Sheyeh, talking about Or and Sof, that Keshem Sheyesh Lo Koach Bivli Gvul, that just as Or and Sof has a power of infinity, Kach Yesh Lo Koach Bigvul, so too it has an infinite power, Take, because it's Or and Sof, but it's an infinite power of Gvul. And if this is the case, Koach HaBli Gvul of Or and Sof will be the source of the Hamshacha, which is unlimited and infinite, that goes around the Tzimtzum, is not affected by the Tzimtzum. You just don't go through something, you go around it. It's called Lako. So you might come and say, wait a minute, Avodas HaKodesh says that Or and Sof is a koach of infinity and a koach of finitude. They are both infinite, but Or and Sof has both powers. Just as it has a power of infinity, it has a power of finitude. So what are you so surprised that it Or and Sof manifests in Seder Hashtalshelus in two ways? Of course it should. Right? So therefore it says, the Koach HaBli Gvul of Or and Sof is the source of the Hamshacha Bilti Mugbel, is the source of the Soivev, the Hamshacha that is unlimited, that circumvents the Tzimtzum. And the power of Gvul of Or and Sof is the source of the Hamshacha Mugbelet, limited, finite Hamshacha, that goes through the Tzimtzum, is affected by the Tzimtzum. And therefore, why you have this question? That just as we learned that the Or Ein Sof has two powers, power of that both infinite because it's Or Ein Sof, but the power of Gvul and power, just as the Or Ein Sof is, as we learned, is Shlemusa de Kula, is the Shlemus of everything, has everything, as you call it, all-inclusive, and therefore, just as it has a power of infinity, it has also an infinite power of finitude. Koach ha-bli gvul, koach ha-gvul. And that should answer the question. Why you have this question? So Rabbi Gopin explains, no, you're mistaken. Why? Because when Hasidus continues to teach about what is the Koach HaGvul and what is the Koach HaBli Gvul in Or Ein Sof, so we learn, Sterne, that Koach HaGvul is the shoresh of the Kelim, is the shoresh of Tzimtzum and Gvul, but not the shoresh of the Or HaMugbal. He says that you cannot use this excuse here, because the Koach, we are talking about Or only. We are not talking about Kelim. And the Koach HaGvul in Or Ein Sof is the shoresh of Kelim. And therefore, we are not talking here about Kelim. We are talking about Or only, Or Ein Sof, and how it goes, how it comes in two kinds of manifestation of this Or. So we are talking about Or only. We're not talking about Kelim yet. We're talking about Or only. And these two Amshachos that we are talking about are whether it is the Amshacha Mugbelet or Amshacha Bilti Mugbelet, Soivev, or Memale, or Makif, or Pnimi, these are all Giluim of Oros. We're not talking about Kelim. And therefore you cannot bring the Koach HaGvul and Koach HaBli Gvul as an explanation here, because the Koach HaGvul is the Koach of Kelim, is the Pshosh of Kelim. And therefore, we're not talking about Kelim here. We're talking about Oros that come in two ways, Or Makif and Or Pnimi. And therefore, in the Maimar comes the question, how you can divide Or and Sof. We're talking only about Or and Sof to two, because it's Or and Sof, it's one. And Rabbi Gopin explains that from the content of the question, you can already understand the direction of the answer. Since we are observing that there are two Hamshachas that come from Or and Sof, you have to say, it necessitates it, you have to say that Or and Sof does have two levels. And the Hamshacha that comes b'Midah Gvul is Mishtalshel, evolves from the lower level of Or and Sof before the Tzimtzum. And therefore the Tzimtzum blocks it. However, the Amshacha Bilti Mugbelet, the Amshacha that is unlimited, comes from a higher level of Or and Sof, and that level circumvents and goes around the Tzimtzum and remains infinite. And really, explains Rabbi Gopin, this is the main point of this Hemshech, of the Hemshech of HaChodesh, to explain that in Or Ein Sof, there are two levels. And they are the makor, the source of two different Amshachos of Chayus, of divine flow and divine vitality. That one goes through the Tzimtzum and becomes limited, and the other circumvents the Tzimtzum and shines in a manner of unlimitedness. So now we are talking about two aspects of Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, about which, if you remember, we quote the Zohar, that when the Zohar describes Or Ein Sof, it says, Or Ein Sof lemala ad en keitz ulemata ad en tachlis. Or Ein Sof, which is infinite high and unlimitedly low. meaning that there are two aspects in Or Ein Sof. Mala or Mata. Lemala ad Ein Sof and Lemata ad Ein Tachlis. So we have Mala and Mata. And now we come to the question, how can you divide between up and down, above and below in Or Ein Sof? If there's any description of Or Ein Sof, usually Kabbalah describes it as an eagle, certainly not as up and down, not as a cow. It's Ein Sof. There's no Mala Mata. The answer for this will be that it's not Mala Mata in terms of location. It is the Tnua in Or Ein Sof, that there are two motions in Or Ein Sof. That one motion of Or Ein Sof goes Mala, withdraws into the source infinitely, and that is the source of all tzimtzumim and concealments and so on. And then there is another aspect of Or Ein Sof that goes infinitely outward and expands and reveals and manifests. And that is Lemata Mata, ad Ein Tachlis. And that's what the Rebbe is explaining here, that when the Zohar says Mala ad Ein Kates, Mata ad Ein Tachlis, it looks like the simple meaning is HaKadosh Baruch Hu has high levels, very high levels, and very low levels. That's a simple meaning. He is the highest and the lowest. And then, obviously, how is Shayach Mala and Mata in Or Ein Sof? And you could settle this question by saying that Or Ein Sof is take bilti mugbal, is not limited, and there is no Mala and there is no Mata. And so where is the division, Lemala and Mata, is regarding the worlds. That Or Ein Sof is so great that it shines in the highest world, Mala ad Ein Kates, and it shines and can reveal itself in the lower worlds, Mata ad Ein Tachlis. And according to this, the Zohar's intention is to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so high and so unlimited and so infinite that regarding himself, he himself is no difference between the different levels, and he can shine in the highest worlds and in the lowest worlds, just as he can shine in the highest worlds. But this is not a good explanation that justifies this expression, Mala ad Ein Kates and Mata ad Ein Tachlis. Why? Because if you want to say that means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present in all worlds equally, then the Zohar would use another expression which is very commonly found in the Zohar and in Kabbalah, Leis asar panui minei. There is no place that is vacant out of the presence of God. So what is the special dagesh here, hadgasha, the special emphasis by saying that the Zohar Dafka chooses to typify Or Ein Sof by describing it as going Mala ad Ein Kates and Mata ad Ein Tachlis. And here too, says Rabbi Gopin, this question itself leads us to the conclusion that in Or Ein Sof itself, there is Mala and Mata. But these are not two sides of up and down, because you cannot say in Or Ein Sof up and down. There are no directions. The intention here, as I said before, that in Or Ein Sof there are two tnuos, there are two motions. The tnua of Mala, in which Or Ein Sof is constantly in aliyah matmedes, is constantly ascending with the goal, so to speak, with the sheifa, how do you call sheifa in English? With the purpose, with
the aspiration.
The aspiration to be included in its source, in the Ma'or. That's one motion in Or Ein Sof, that it constantly being in aliyah masmedes, that it is constantly ascending to its source. And then there's a tnua of mata. There's no place of mata. There's a motion of mata, and that is the aspiration and the yearning to extend itself and to manifest and to reveal and to expand and to shine everywhere. And these two aspects of mala and mata, which are, you can call it also hiskalelus and hispashtus, inclusion and outward expression. These are the makor, the source of the two hamshachos from Or Ein Sof. The hiskalelus lemala, the hiskalelus, the inclusion, the withdrawal into the ascending into the source, indicates and causes and is manifesting as tzimtzum and kivutz, which means it goes away from revelation. So it's about tzimtzum, about concealment, about contraction, tzimtzum, kivutz. And this is the makor of Or HaGvul. This will be the source of the light of finitude, of limitation. And that is the aliyah lemala, lemala mala ad en ketz. The yerida lemata indicates his pashtus, his rachavus, expansion. And that is the source of Or HaBli Gvul, of Or HaSoibed. So these two tnuos.
You would think the opposite.
A teacher teaches. The students don't really get it well enough, and he feels that he has to give a marshal to what he explains. He's explaining, trying to make clear. So he is silent for a few minutes. What is he doing? Lemala mala. He's going back to himself, to his sechel, and trying to dig deep and find, create a marshal. So he is going into himself, to deeper into his understanding of the subject in order to come out with a marshal. But what he's doing now is he's going back to himself, mala mala. And for the students, what happens? It's a tzimtzum, it's concealment. He's not talking to them, he's not revealing anything, he's concealed. He's away from them. That's like the marshal that the Chassidus gives for Galus, that Hashem is not revealed. He really going deeper into himself. But so there is no revelation. Then when the teacher will go back to mata mata, meaning now he goes again away from the source and now going towards explaining, that means revealing again and explaining to the students and presenting the marshal for the teacher, it will be mata mata, meaning expanding and going away from the source and revealing. And for the students, it will be abundance of revelation. Or makif, which will not everything, even it will help them to understand, but it's still, there will be a tremendous gilui. For them, it will be wow, So this is the idea of the question on Tikkun HaZohar that describes the Maila of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Or Ein Sof Lemala Mala Ad En Ketz Mata Mata Ad En Tachlis, how we can divide Or Ein Sof to two aspects, Mala and Mata. We will learn further about the question about it, the answer of it in details. Now, but I want to continue the Chazara. I'm just bringing the topics we brought. Now, the Rebbe is continuing to explain these two aspects of Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. And in order to explain it, so, really to explain more and more about this Or Ein Sof and these two aspects of Or Ein Sof. But in order to do that, he begins, so to speak, a new inyan, which, Yos Hashem, next time I will explain more the context of it. But so right now, let's do the review. a new inyan in understanding the subject of Ein Sof. We use it so much, Or Ein Sof, Ein Sof, Sof, Ein Sof. So we need to understand, to learn when Kabbalah says Ein Sof, we need to understand what it means. And why, of course, another big question that we asked is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Ein Sof, which is an adjective that is suitable more for the creations and worlds rather than Hashem. Because the Maila of the Creator, the unique Maila of the Creator, is that Ein Lo Tchila, that he has no beginning. You can find creations that have no sof, no end, like the sun that is not diminishing. Hashem puts nitzchius into the sun. But it doesn't mean that the sun has no tchila, that the sun has no beginning. So the inyan of Ein Sof is shayach more to worlds. But if you want to talk about uniqueness of the Creator himself, it's better to say Ein Lo Tchila, because no one and nothing else but God has a beginning, has no beginning. He alone has no beginning. Yet, in Kabbalah and Hasidus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Ein Sof, and this is a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, being Ein Sofi, being infinite, and Bilti Mugbal, to the extent that he can create Oilamos Yesh Me'ayin. So why not Ein Lo Tchila? Ein Lo Tchila, if we call him Ein Lo Tchila, he has no beginning, then we would indicate about Hashem that he is being Kadmon, what we call Kadmon, primordial, which means nobody and nothing preceded him. And he is first to all creations. This is way higher adjective and description than Ein Sof. As we learn that the Rameh said that Kol Kadmon Nitzchi v'lo Kol Nitzchi Kadmon. Any Kadmon, anyone that is Kadmon, that means that no one else made it, will be automatically Nitzchi, will be eternal. But not everything which is eternal will be automatically Kadmon. It can have someone else or something else that caused it and yet shine forever. And that's like the nature of Or.
There's no other Kadmon but Hashem.
Exactly. So why is called Ein Sof? Why not Ein Tchila? Even Ak, I'm trying to skip something. Even Ak, Adam Kadmon, is called Adam Kadmon. No one can be called Kadmon. So you cannot. What about Adam Kadmon? Kabbalah calls Adam Kadmon. Kadmon here doesn't mean that it has no source and it has nothing that preceded it. It means that it's Kadum and Rishon to all the Nivaim. It's the first of, there was no Niva, no world preceded Adam Kadmon. It's the first of the Nivaim, or Batzilus, or Biyah, but it doesn't mean that it has no, that is primordial in the sense that it has no source. Now, Rabbi Gopin, in order to help us to understand the discussion here, will go deeper and deeper to understand the concept of Kadmon. And we will find, we say Kadmon. Kadmon also has different levels. Kadmon means primordial. No one came before, right? But there are different levels of Kadmon, very subtle, and you'll have to kind of be present to this discussion because it gets deeper and deeper, and it's wonderful, and it's not impossible to understand. It just, you need to kind of be present to the gradual details, the subtleties. So he begins like this. Let's first, to understand Ein Lo Tchila, we first have to understand thoroughly what Kadmon means. The simple meaning of kadmon means relates to zman, to the concept of time. Kadmon comes from kedem, kodem, before. Before means time. Before and after, that means time. And all the Nevi'im, in that sense, are not kadmonim. Why? Because before the creation of the world, they didn't exist, and now they exist. So they are not kadmon. They are not. They were not always there, and therefore they are not kadmon. Here, though, explains Rabbi Gopin, when we are talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is lemala min hazman, so obviously, when you say kadmon about godliness, you are not referring to time, because it cannot be connected to time, because the time itself was created. So therefore, and Hashem is above time, obviously. And therefore, you cannot say about Hashem that he is kadmon in terms of time, because its time doesn't apply to him altogether. So what can you say about kadmon? So if you go be above the inyan of time, so what would kadmon mean? If it's not about time, what would it mean? So if it's not about time, it's about level. It's about level. Meaning, nothing caused him, not about time, about level. And we will see that it has at least 3 levels to that. So it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was first in level, and there's no level that preceded him. He gives the example here, let's say, Bina as it comes out of Chokhmah. That Bina, in Chokhmah there's no Bina. Bina only starts after Chokhmah. So you cannot say that Bina is Kadmon, because there is a level that came before Bina, that Bina came from. And therefore you cannot call, even not about time, but in terms of level, you cannot call Bina Kadmon. And so too, Koach HaChokhmah in relation to Ratzon and so on. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only one that has no reason or cause that made him. He is not depending on anything. There is no level that he is not present in, and therefore he is the only Kadmon. So all others, there's always another level that came before it, even if not in time, and therefore you cannot call it Kadmon. Only by Hashem, there's no level that Hashem came about from, so to speak, God forbid. And this is the meaning of the concept Ein Lo Tchila, that he has no beginning. So the power of Bina, that is a new power that comes out of Chokhmah, this power of Bina has Tchila, Chokhmah. Because in Chokhmah it didn't exist, and now exists a new level of Bina. And so too Koach HaChokhmah, that is created and was not present in Ratzon, and now it is created as a separate Koach, and it began in Chokhmah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, though, Ein Lo Tchila, he didn't begin in any level, any darga, and he exists and present in all levels, in all conditions. And if this is the case, the shaila is strong about the Mekubalim, why they call the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ein Sof, which is really, can be a praise for Nevi'im, and not praise Hashem with the true Maila that it is his Kadmon and Ein Lo Tchila. Now, in order to understand that, why the Mekubalim called HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ein Sof and not Ein Lo Tchila, the Rebbe Rasha brings a famous and fundamental discussion between the earlier Mekubalim and the later Mekubalim, between the earlier Mekubalim and the Ramak, Moshe Cordovero and the Arizal, that really you will see that there are three opinions: the early Mekubalim, then the Ramak, and then the Arizal that compromises between both. We began there. And the discussion was about the level of Keser. Is Keser counted as one of the 10 spheros or not? The concept of 10 spheros, as we mentioned last time, is written first in Sefer Yetzirah, believed to be created by Avraham Avinu and written by Rabbi Akiva, in most opinions. And in Sefer Yetzirah it says, 10 spheros bli ma. 10 velo 9, 10 velo 11. But there is a machlekes between the Mekubalim. What are the 10 spheros? Everybody agrees there are 10 spheros. What are they? And is Keser one of them or not? They are those that count the 10 spheros from Chochmah and down. These are the early Mekubalim. And the Keser is not counted as part of the 10. And therefore in that case, Das will be counted. And there are those who count the spheros from Keser and down, and therefore they omit Das. And we will understand why. And therefore, it says that b'makom she'keser nimna, that's the expression in Hasidus, that in a place when the Keser is counted, ein hadas nimne. The Das is not counted. And b'makom she'ein ha'keser nimna, hadas nimna. And the Arizal will resolve it in a manner that will make sense to us. So, the early Mekubalim thought that Keser is not part of the counting of 10 spheros and is called Ein Sof just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Keser is called Ein Sof just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Ein Sof. And we will dive into that. The Ramak, that came a little later, Reb Moshe Cordovero, in his Sefer Pardes Rimonim, Pardes, in the Shar, the chapter that is called Ha'im Ein Sof Hu HaKeser, there is a whole chapter in Sefer HaPardes that is titled, Is Ein Sof Keser? Is Keser Ein Sof? The Ramak disagrees with the early Mekubalim and holds that Keser is part of the 10 spheros. And he explains, the Ramak, that first of all, they all agree. The early Mekubalim, including the Ramak, agree that Keser is way, way higher than all other spheros. And we will explain how. The disagreement is regarding the nature of the Maila of Keser over the other spheros. Everybody agrees that Keser is way, way higher than other spheros. But how higher and the nature of the transcendence of Keser over other spheros, there is a disagreement between the early Mekubalim and the Ramak. And we will stop here and Emir Hashem review the disagreement between the early Mekubalim and the Reb Moshe Cordovero. Then we will dive deeper into the concept of Kadmon, and we'll see that there are very subtle dargas of Kadmon. And then we will continue from where we stopped, Bezrat Hashem. So thanks for your presence, and we should hear good news and from Klal Yisrael, especially from those who need to come home from captivity, and especially the Gilui of Lemala Mala Aden Kates and Lemata Mata Aden Tachton being both fully revealed through Gilui Ha'atzmus of the Geula Amitis V'Ashleima and the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach B'Rosheinu, and good news for everyone.
Could you
Yes.
could you just give us one point in that, not to the whole discussion about why we say Ein Sof and not Kadmon or Ein Tchila? Not we go with the whole discussion, but just a nekuda, the chokhmah of the inyan.
That the early Mekubalim emphasized the fact that Keser has no beginning, in the sense that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was there, I'm giving you only one point, okay? This is not doing justice to the topic. But the Keser was always there. That the Keser, if it's Ratzon, just as there is Atzmus, in Atzmus there is always Ratzon. So Keser is as Kadum, as Kadmona Shel Olam. And therefore they call Keser also Ein Sof, because it's like Kadmona Shel Olam. The Ramak holds, you need to understand, okay, let me just throw a few nekudos. Obviously, the Ramak holds that the Keser is Mechudash, that it wasn't always there, it's Mechudash, it has a beginning. And then we need to go before that deeper into to understand what Kadmon is, because as we began to discuss it by saying that it's not about time. Obviously, godliness is about time. It's about level. But then you have different Kadmons. You have, for instance, the shadow of a person. The shadow of the person is always existed. If there's light, right, you exist, your shadow exists. If you have a lamp on the table, the moment you move your hand, you have the shadow of the finger, the shadow of the hand. You can't separate, it's always there. When your hand is there, the cell is there. So they held that you can call the shadow, you can call it Kadmon. And therefore they call Keser Ein Sof. It's not Mechudash, like the other spheros. Therefore, they didn't include, that's the early Mekubalim. The Ramak says, no, you cannot say it, because, the cell, even though it was always there, the cell has a cause. The cell wouldn't be there without the person. The person doesn't need the cell, the shadow, but the shadow needs the person. Why? Because the person is the cause, not in time, but the person is the cause, even though the mamash come together. So you cannot call it Enot Chila. So you call it Ein Sof. These are the few topics that are coming up here. But the only one that can really resolve it is the Arizal, that will still need to explain his Shita as well, but the Arizal says that Keser is Memutza. A Memutza that include Atik and Arich, which means the Matzil and the Ne'etzal. How is it possible that Matzil can be in a Memutza? Matzil can be there as part of it? Okay, we have to continue to learn. These are subtle subjects.